Lisa Martinez wiped down another table in the busy cantina. The place never seemed to get quiet. Beings from 20 different worlds came and went all day long. Some had scales, others had crystal skin that sparkled under the lights. A few looked like moving clouds of gas that somehow managed to sit in chairs. She had been working here for 6 months now. Every day was the same. Take orders, bring food, clean tables, and listen to aliens talk about how great they were. Most of them acted like humans were nothing special. Just another new species that got lucky enough to reach the stars. The space station called New Haven hung in orbit around a dead planet in the Centauri system. It was huge, bigger than most cities back on Earth. Humans built it as their first real home away from Earth. Now it served as a meeting place for all the different alien races that controlled this part of the galaxy. Lisa tucked a loose strand of black hair behind her ear and moved to the next table. 3 tall reptilian creatures sat there. Their green scales caught the light as they moved. These were Valians, warriors from a powerful empire that controlled dozens of star systems. They wore military uniforms covered in medals and ribbons. At the table next to them sat 2 beings that looked like they were made of living crystal. Light passed through their bodies in strange patterns. These were members of the Crystalline Collective. People said they were the smartest beings in the galaxy. They certainly acted like they thought so. Lisa approached the Valian table first. "Can I get you anything else?" The largest Valian looked up at her. His yellow eyes studied her like she was some kind of bug. "More of that fermented grain drink. The one from your pathetic little world? You mean beer?" "Yes, that." He waved a clawed hand at her. "Bring 3 more." Lisa nodded and walked away. She had learned not to take their rudeness personally. The Valians treated everyone that way, not just humans. Their whole culture was built around being tough and mean. At the bar, Jake Sullivan was mixing drinks for a group of blue-skinned traders. Jake used to be a soldier back on Earth before he came out here. He was one of the few people on the station who knew that Lisa was more than just a waitress. "Let me guess," Jake said without looking up. "The lizards want more beer. 3 more." Lisa leaned against the bar. "They never say please or thank you." "That's because they think we're beneath them." Jake filled 3 glasses with the golden liquid. "All of them do." Lisa knew he was right. In the 6 months she had worked here, she had learned to speak basics, phrases in most of the alien languages. She understood more than she let on. The aliens talked freely around her, like she was just part of the furniture. They said things they probably would not say if they knew she could understand them. She carried the drinks back to the Valian table. As she set them down, she heard the crystal beings at the next table talking in their musical language. Their words sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "The Harmony Festival approaches," one of them said. "Soon all species will display their greatest cultural achievements." The other crystal being made a sound like breaking glass. Lisa knew this meant laughter in their language. "Including the humans. How amusing." The largest Valian heard them and turned around. "You think the humans will actually participate?" "They have been included in the invitation," the first crystal being replied, "though I cannot imagine what they might offer. Their culture is so young and simple." Lisa pretended not to understand as she finished placing the drinks. But her hands tightened on the empty tray. "Perhaps they will show us how to make that fermented grain drink," the Valian leader said. His laugh sounded like rocks grinding together. "Or maybe they will demonstrate their skill at carrying plates." More aliens at nearby tables began to listen. A group of gas-like beings started to glow brighter, which Lisa knew meant they found something funny. Some insect creatures at another table began clicking their mandibles together. "Humans have no real art," said the second crystal being. "They make noise with primitive instruments and call it music. They splash color on flat surfaces and call it painting. Children could do better." "They are useful for simple tasks," the Valian leader said, loud enough for the whole cantina to hear. "Serving food, cleaning floors, basic manual labor. But culture? Art? They should leave such things to beings who understand them." Lisa felt her face grow hot. Around the cantina, other human workers stopped what they were doing. Danny Wright, the supervisor, started walking over from across the room. His face was red with anger, but Lisa held up a hand to stop him. She had dealt with worse than this. Back on Earth, she had spent 4 years studying how different cultures expressed themselves through art and language. She had learned to speak 19 alien languages fluently and could understand pieces of dozen more. She knew more about alien cultures than most of the diplomats on the station, but she also knew that getting angry would not help anything. These beings judged humans based on what they saw. A waitress getting upset would only prove their point about humans being simple and emotional. "Tell me, human," the Valian leader called out to her. "What will your species contribute to the Harmony Festival? What great cultural achievement will you share with the galaxy?" The cantina got quiet. Every alien in the place was looking at Lisa now. Some seemed curious, others looked like they were expecting a joke. A few appeared to be recording the conversation. Lisa looked around the room. In the corner sat an old piano that had been brought up from Earth when the station was first built. Most people ignored it. The aliens certainly did not understand what it was for. "I suppose we could share our music," Lisa said quietly. The crystal beings made their glass-breaking laugh sound again. "Music? You mean that random noise humans make?" "It has no mathematical beauty," the other crystal being added. "No logical structure. It is chaos pretending to be art." The Valian leader stood up. He was nearly 7 feet tall and had to look down at Lisa. "Show us this human music. Prove that your species deserves to stand among the civilized races of the galaxy." Around the cantina, aliens began making sounds that Lisa recognized as laughter in their various languages. Some started making bets about how quickly she would embarrass herself. Lisa looked at the piano again. She had not played in months. Her fingers felt stiff and uncertain, but she knew these beings needed to understand something important about humans. They needed to learn that being small or quiet or working a simple job did not make someone worthless. She walked slowly toward the piano. Behind her, the laughter got louder. Someone called out that this would be the shortest cultural demonstration in galactic history. Another voice said they should record it to show other species what human art looked like. Lisa sat down at the old wooden bench. The piano was badly out of tune, but it would have to do. She placed her hands on the yellowed keys and took a deep breath. The cantina fell silent. Every being in the room leaned forward to watch the human waitress make a fool of herself and her entire species. Lisa sat at the piano bench with her hands resting on the keys. The cantina was so quiet she could hear the hum of the air recyclers. Every alien in the room watched her, waiting for her to fail. Jake Sullivan knew more about Lisa than anyone else on the station. While she served drinks and cleaned tables, he had watched her study alien languages during her breaks. He had seen her reading books about different cultures late at night when the cantina closed. She spoke to the alien customers in their own languages when she thought no one was listening. 3 years ago, Lisa had graduated from Earth University with degrees in language studies and cultural research. She could have gotten a job with the diplomatic corps or worked as a translator for the government. Instead, she chose to come to New Haven. She wanted to learn about alien cultures by living among them, not by reading reports in an office. Jake moved closer to the piano. He could see Lisa's hands shaking slightly. The Valian leader was still standing, his yellow eyes fixed on her. The crystal beings had moved to get a better view. Even the gas creatures had solidified enough to watch. Clearly, this should be interesting, one of the Valians said to his companions. "I have never heard human music before." "You will wish you never had," replied another. "I heard recordings once. It sounds like animals in pain." The crystal beings made their tinkling laugh sounds. "At least it will be brief. Humans cannot concentrate for very long." More aliens had entered the cantina. Word was spreading through the station that something entertaining was about to happen. A group of tall, thin beings with purple skin found seats near the back. Their large eyes could see colors that humans could not even imagine. Some insect-like creatures scuttled in on 6 legs each. They communicated by clicking sounds and body movements. Right now, they were clicking in what Jake recognized as excitement. Lisa looked around the room at all the watching faces. She had dreamed of this moment for years, but not like this. She had imagined introducing human culture to aliens in a formal setting, with respect and ceremony. Instead, she was being treated like entertainment, like a pet doing tricks. But she also knew this might be the only chance humans would get. If she failed now, it would confirm everything the aliens believed about human culture. It would prove that humans were only good for simple work and had nothing valuable to offer the galaxy. She pressed down on middle C. The note rang out clear and true despite the piano being old and worn. Some of the aliens made surprise sounds. They had expected the instrument to sound terrible. "What is that device?" asked one of the crystal beings. "It is called a piano," Lisa said without turning around. "We use it to make music." "How does it work?" The crystal being sounded curious now instead of mocking. Lisa pressed several keys to demonstrate. Each key makes a different sound. When you combine them in the right way, they create music. The Valian leader crossed his arms. "Prove it. Show us this human music." Jake could see more aliens gathering outside the cantina. The station's communication system carried sound between sections, and people were starting to notice something unusual was happening. Danny Wright stood near the bar looking nervous. This was not the kind of attention he wanted for his cantina. Lisa began with something simple. She played a basic scale, each note following the next in order. The aliens listened politely but did not seem impressed. Some started to look bored. Then she played a simple melody. It was an old song from Earth, one that children learned in school. The tune was gentle and easy to follow. A few of the aliens tilted their heads, listening more carefully. "The sounds follow a pattern," observed one of the crystal beings. "There is logic to it." "Simple logic," replied his companion. "Any child could understand it." Lisa continued playing, adding harmony with her left hand. Now the simple melody had depth and richness. The aliens grew quieter, paying closer attention. Jake knew Lisa was just getting started. He had heard her practice late at night when she thought no one was around. She could play music that would make a grown man cry or dance with joy. But she was being careful now, starting slow so the aliens could follow along. The purple-skinned beings were moving their heads in time with the music. Their large eyes had closed, and they seemed to be concentrating hard. Jake had heard that their species experienced music differently than most others. They could hear mathematical relationships that others missed. The insect creatures had stopped clicking to each other. Their antennae twitched in rhythm with the piano. Even the gas beings had stopped glowing so brightly, as if they were trying to focus on the sounds. Lisa finished the simple song and let the last note fade away. The cantina was silent for a moment. Then one of the Valians made a grunt of approval. "Not terrible," he admitted, "but hardly impressive." "Play something more complex," demanded the crystal being leader. "Show us what human music can really do." Lisa's hands moved to a different position on the keys. This time she began something more challenging. The melody was faster and more complicated. Her fingers moved quickly across the keys, creating sounds that danced and swirled through the air. The aliens leaned forward. This was clearly more advanced than what they had expected from human culture. The mathematical patterns were more sophisticated. The emotional content was deeper. A crowd had gathered outside the cantina now. Beings from all over the station were coming to see what was happening. Some pressed against the windows trying to get a better view. Others found ways to squeeze into the already crowded room. Jake realized that something important was happening. This was not just about Lisa playing piano anymore. This was about how the entire galaxy saw humanity. Every note she played was being judged not just as music, but as proof of what humans could achieve. Lisa's playing grew more confident as she continued. Her fingers found their rhythm, and the old piano responded beautifully. The melody soared and dipped, creating pictures and sound that even beings who had never heard human music before could understand. The mockery had stopped completely. Even the most arrogant aliens were listening with genuine attention now. Some had expressions on their faces that Jake had never seen before. They looked surprised and maybe even impressed. But Lisa was still just warming up. Jake knew she had barely begun to show what human music could really do. Lisa's fingers moved across the keys with growing confidence. The simple melodies she had started with gave way to something much more complex. She began playing a piece by a composer named Chopin, a human who had lived centuries ago on Earth. The music flowed through the cantina like water. Each note connected to the next in ways that created patterns within patterns. The aliens who had been laughing just minutes before now sat in complete silence, listening to every sound. The crystal beings were the first to react in a way that surprised everyone. Their bodies began to glow softly, pulsing in time with the music. Lisa knew from her studies that this happened when they encountered something that matched their understanding of mathematical beauty. "Impossible," whispered the crystal being leader. "The harmonic ratios are perfect. How does she know our sacred numbers?" Lisa had spent 2 years studying crystalline culture. She knew they saw all beauty as mathematical relationships. When she played certain combinations of notes, she was speaking their language in ways they never expected a human to understand. The Valian leader had stopped looking bored. His yellow eyes followed Lisa's hands as they moved across the keyboard. Warriors respected skill and precision, and he could see both in her playing. Her fingers hit each key exactly when they needed to, with exactly the right force. Jake watched from behind the bar as more beings crowded into the cantina. Representatives from species he had never seen before pushed through the doorway. The station's communication system was carrying the music to other sections, drawing curious aliens from across New Haven. Lisa transitioned into a different style of music. This piece was from Earth's jazz tradition, full of improvisation and unexpected changes, but she played it in a way that included elements from alien musical forms she had studied. For the gas beings, she created flowing lines that matched how they moved through space. The melody rose and fell like their natural drifting motions. Their glow shifted to colors that Jake had learned meant deep appreciation. For the insect creatures, she added rhythmic patterns that matched their clicking communications. The steady beat became like a conversation in their language. Their antennae stopped twitching randomly and began moving in organized patterns. The purple-skinned beings with the large eyes were swaying now. Their species heard music in colors that others could not see. Lisa somehow knew this and played combinations that painted pictures in their minds. Jake realized that Lisa was not just playing human music anymore. She was creating something new, something that spoke to every species, in the room at the same time. She was building bridges between cultures through sound. The cantina had filled beyond capacity. Beings stood shoulder to shoulder, or whatever they had instead of shoulders. Some floated near the ceiling. Others pressed against the windows from outside. The normal noise and chatter of the busy establishment had been replaced by absolute attention to the music. Lisa moved into a piece that Jake recognized. She had been working on it for months during her free time. It was her own composition, something she had created to tell the story of humanity's journey to the stars. The music started soft and lonely, representing Earth before humans knew they were not alone in the universe. It spoke of a small blue planet where beings looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. Then came the moment of first contact, when alien ships appeared in Earth's sky. The music grew complex and uncertain, full of fear and excitement mixed together. It captured the confusion of realizing that humans were newcomers in a galaxy full of ancient civilizations. The melody shifted to represent humanity's struggles to find their place among the stars. It spoke of feeling small and unimportant, of being dismissed by beings who had mastered space travel while humans were still learning to make fire. But then the music began to change. It grew stronger and more confident. It spoke of human determination, of the refusal to give up even when others said they were not good enough. It captured the spirit that had brought humans from caves to starships in just a few thousand years. Jake watched the faces around the room change as Lisa's music continued. The mockery was completely gone now. Even the most arrogant beings were listening with something that looked like respect. The Valian leader had sat down. His aggressive posture was gone, replaced by the focused attention of someone hearing something they had never experienced before. Jake could see that the music was affecting him in ways the warrior probably did not fully understand. The crystal beings were glowing brighter now, their bodies resonating with harmonics that spread through the cantina. Other crystal beings in different parts of the station were responding to the sound, their bodies picking up the vibrations and adding to them. Lisa's composition built toward its climax. The music spoke of humanity's hope for the future, of the dream that all the different species in the galaxy could learn to understand each other. It suggested that diversity was not something to fear but something to celebrate. She played themes that represented each species in the cantina, then wove them together into a single beautiful whole. The Valian war chants became part of the melody. The crystalline mathematical sequences added structure and beauty. The flowing movements of the gas beings and the rhythmic communications of the insect creatures all found their place in the music. For the first time since humans had joined the galactic community, someone was suggesting that they all belonged to the same universe, that they could be part of something larger than their individual species. The cantina was completely silent except for the piano. Beings who had never agreed on anything were united in their attention to Lisa's performance. She had created something that spoke to the deepest parts of consciousness that all thinking beings shared. And she was not finished yet. Lisa's music grew stronger as she reached the heart of her composition. The cantina had become something more than just a place to eat and drink. It had transformed into a concert hall where beings from across the galaxy experienced something they had never heard before. The sound system that carried announcements throughout New Haven was now broadcasting Lisa's performance to every section of the station. In the diplomatic quarters, Ambassador Zethkri stopped reading his military reports. The music coming through his wall speakers made him look up with surprise. Zethkri was older than the Valian leader in the cantina, with more scars and more experience in war. He had fought battles on dozens of worlds and had never been impressed by anything soft or artistic. But this human music was different. It had strength and purpose that reminded him of his own people's war songs. In the crystal meditation chambers, the High Council was trying to conduct their daily discussion of mathematical philosophy. But High Counselor Morden's body was glowing and vibrating with such intensity that the other council members could not concentrate. The resonance was spreading through their crystalline structures, creating harmonics they had never experienced. "What is causing this disturbance?" asked one of the council members. Mordun tried to speak, but found that his voice had changed. The human music had altered his natural frequency. "It comes from the cantina level. A human is creating sounds that match our sacred mathematical principles." The other council members looked at each other in confusion. Humans were not supposed to understand crystalline mathematics. They were too simple and emotional to grasp such complex concepts. Back in the cantina, Lisa continued playing. Her composition had reached the section that told of humanity's dreams for the future. The music spoke of a time when all species would work together, when differences would become strengths instead of reasons for conflict. She played melodies that represented peace and cooperation, but these were not weak or gentle sounds. They had the power of conviction behind them, the strength that comes from believing in something worth fighting for. The Valian leader found himself thinking of his homeworld, where young warriors learned to sing before they learned to fight. The best battles, his teachers had told him, were won not just with weapons but with the spirit that united fighters in common cause. Jake watched as beings throughout the cantina began to change their posture. Species that normally kept to themselves were moving closer together. The rigid social boundaries that usually separated different aliens were starting to blur. A group of small, furry creatures that looked like earth rabbits had entered the cantina. They were normally shy and avoided large gatherings, but the music seemed to give them courage. They found spaces between the larger beings and listened with their long ears pointed toward the piano. The gas beings had formed a circle near the ceiling, their bodies moving in patterns that Jake had never seen before. They were dancing, he realized. Their species had ways of expressing joy through movement, and Lisa's music was inspiring them to celebrate. Even the mechanical beings were affected. A pair of robots from the trade section had somehow made their way to the cantina. Their optical sensors were focused on Lisa, and their metallic bodies were vibrating slightly in response to the sound waves. Lisa began to incorporate elements that appealed to each new species that had joined her audience. For the rabbit creatures, she added high, sweet notes that matched their gentle nature. For the robots, she created precise mathematical rhythms that their computer minds could appreciate. But she did not just play separate melodies for each species. Instead, she wove everything together into a single, unified whole. The gentle rabbit melodies became the foundation for the stronger Valian themes. The mathematical robot rhythms supported the flowing gas being harmonies. Jake realized he was watching something that had never happened before in galactic history. Lisa was creating music that spoke to every form of consciousness at the same time. She was proving that beings who seemed completely different actually shared common ground. General Carthax arrived at the cantina entrance but could not push through the crowd. The hallway outside was packed with aliens trying to get closer to the music. He had come to investigate reports of a disturbance, but what he found was the opposite of trouble. "What is happening here?" he demanded of a nearby officer. "A human is playing music, sir. Everyone wants to hear it." Carthax had heard human music before. It was crude and simple, nothing that should attract this kind of attention. But as he listened more carefully, he began to understand why so many beings had gathered. This was not the primitive noise he expected. This was sophisticated art that demonstrated deep understanding of alien cultures. The human playing this music knew more about Valian tradition than most Valians did. Inside the cantina, Lisa's performance was building toward its climax. She had been playing for nearly an hour, but her hands showed no signs of tiredness. If anything, she seemed to be gaining strength from the response of her audience. The crystal beings were now glowing so brightly that they lit up the entire cantina. Their resonance had created a feedback loop that amplified Lisa's music, making it richer and more complex than any single piano could produce. Lisa smiled as she felt the music take on a life of its own. She was no longer just playing for the aliens. She was playing with them, creating something that belonged to all of them together. The final section of her composition began. This was the part that would determine whether her performance succeeded. In changing minds or simply entertained for a few minutes before being forgotten, Lisa brought her composition to its final crescendo. Every note built upon the last, creating a wall of sound that filled not just the cantina, but seemed to reach into the hearts of every being listening. Her fingers moved across the keys with perfect precision, drawing music from the old piano that it had never produced before. As the last note rang out and slowly faded into silence, the cantina remained absolutely still. No one moved. No one spoke. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then something happened that had never occurred in the history of New Haven Station. Ambassador Zethkri, the fierce Valian warrior who had mocked Lisa just an hour before, stood up from his chair. Slowly, deliberately, he began the ritual clapping that his people used to honor the greatest achievements in battle. But this was not applause for victory in war. This was recognition of a different kind of conquest, entirely. The sound of his clapping echoed through the silent cantina. One by one, the other Valians joined him. Then the crystal beings began to pulse with light in their own version of appreciation. The gas creatures swirled in patterns that meant joy and respect. The insect beings clicked their mandibles in harmonious rhythms. Soon, every species in the cantina was expressing approval in their own way. The rabbit creatures hummed soft songs. The robots flashed their lights in synchronized patterns. Even species that Jake had never seen before were showing signs of deep appreciation. General Carthax pushed through the crowd outside and finally made it into the cantina. When he saw the scene before him, he stopped in shock. His own soldiers were showing respect to a human waitress. More importantly, beings from species that had been enemies for centuries were standing side by side, united in their response to her music. "What is your name?" Carthax asked Lisa, as the appreciation finally began to quiet down. "Lisa Martinez," she replied, standing up from the piano bench. "Lisa Martinez," the general repeated, as if testing how the human name sounded. "I have fought in more battles than I can count. I have seen planets burn and empires fall. But I Have never seen anything like what you just did." He turned to address the entire cantina. "This human has shown us something we have forgotten. We have been so focused on our differences that we forgot what we share. Her music speaks to something that exists in all of us." High Counselor Morden entered the cantina, his crystal body still glowing from the resonance he had felt in the meditation chambers. "The High Council has made a decision," he announced. "We formally request that Lisa Martinez perform at our most sacred ceremony. This is an honor we have never offered to any organic being." The Valian ambassador stepped forward. "My people have a saying, the greatest warriors are not those who win through strength alone, but those who unite others in common cause. Lisa Martinez, you have won a victory today without firing a single shot." Jake could hardly believe what he was seeing. These were the same beings who had been laughing at humans just hours ago. Now they were treating Lisa like a hero. Danny Wright, the cantina supervisor, was speechless. His quiet employee had just accomplished something that years of diplomatic negotiations had failed to achieve. She had earned genuine respect for humanity from some of the most powerful species in the galaxy. Within hours, recordings of Lisa's performance were spreading through the quantum communication networks that connected star systems across this part of the galaxy. Species that had never showed interest in human culture were requesting copies. Some were asking for formal meetings with human representatives. The Harmony Festival, which had been planned as a small cultural exchange, was suddenly being transformed into something much larger. Instead of being a minor participant, humanity was asked to coordinate the entire event. Lisa was appointed as the first human cultural ambassador, a position created specifically to honor what she had achieved. 3 months later, Lisa stood on the stage of the Grand Harmony Amphitheater. The massive structure had been built to hold representatives from every known species in the galaxy. Her old piano from the cantina sat at the center of a huge orchestra that included musicians from 50 different worlds. Jake was in the audience, wearing the dress uniform of New Haven's new cultural exchange department. Danny had been promoted to Director of Interspecies Relations and was busy coordinating events across the station. The cantina had become a pilgrimage site. Beings traveled from across the galaxy to see where the human waitress had first played the music that changed everything. The old piano was treated with respect by aliens who once would have dismissed it as primitive junk. As Lisa began to play the opening notes of her expanded composition, she thought about how much had changed. A year ago, she had been just another human trying to prove that her species belonged among the stars. Now she was the bridge between worlds, and her music had become a universal language. The performance that night lasted 3 hours. When it ended, representatives from over 200 species stood together in appreciation. The sound filled the amphitheater and echoed across space, carrying a message that had never been sent before. The message was simple but powerful. It said that no being was too small, no culture too young, and no dream too humble to change the galaxy. It said that sometimes the greatest victories come not from weapons or technology, but from the courage to share what makes you who you are. Lisa Martinez, the waitress who had been mocked for her humble job, had become the voice of unity in a diverse galaxy. Her piano had become the symbol of humanity's greatest gift to the stars. The music that flowed from her fingers was no longer just human. It had become truly universal, proving that harmony could be found even among the most different beings. The galaxy would never be the same.